we now come to a time when you can ask the questions that you have. I would ask you to kind of frame your questions, and either for Michael or for Earl. If you wanted to respond to anything Michael raised, or go ahead and go to other questions.
No, I feel honored that the way he characterized teaching that I was trying to, and I do believe that exposition by nature takes time. It takes time to happen, and maybe that's what becomes its biggest problem. A pastor feels, I don't have time, and I think you hit on that, and you and I talked about that too. It's a little bit like taking the long view, and that long view then does preserve human agency, because you're respecting a person's journey to take the time that it takes to hear it, to process it, and we've got to trust the gospel enough that it makes its own point given time. So by nature, exposition is taking, maybe someone might say a slower, but it's a longer range strategy. And it is true that some people feel, and I can understand it, you know, there's a sense of urgency that some people feel, I've got to get this out. And then that urgency means that they shorten that human agency need. And then they end up maybe with people that too quickly believe or too quickly agree, and then later they realize they didn't really understand what they were believing. And I think it's better to take that time. And you and I have talked about this. We did that those 2 days, and man, you said it better than I said it.
One thing that came through in those conversations was we live in a culture that is geared toward instant gratification. Right? We all know that. Those children, particularly, and preaching in a culture that is geared for instant gratification, instant opinion, instant everything, taking the long haul. Sometimes the temptation is, don't take that long, don't take that long. But I think we have a tremendous opportunity because young people are looking for authenticity in a way that maybe we haven't looked for authenticity in the past. And authenticity of relationship, like you had with that young man that I read the story about, even though you didn't know you had that much relationship with him, but the time that it takes to develop expositional communication, to let the Bible make its own point in our lives, that paves the way for that kind of authenticity to develop. So, yeah, I think obviously this is the way to go. I mean, we're not trying to give people biblical bonbons. We're trying to give them biblical protein.
Wow. Bonbons do sound good, though. Who has a burning question or comment for one of our guests here?
I know that you can do expositional teaching and preaching in any kind of like structure, but do you think using more of a lectio continua rather than isolated lectionary text enables you to go deeper into expositional teaching or preaching?
You know, that is a very good question. Lectionary preaching, I think, is very authentic, and I have done some lectionary preaching when I've been assigned to do it. My instinct is I would rather take a body of material and go through it and let it and have more time with it. So I guess my natural instinct is not to go the lectionary route. I have been, I've been invited from time to time to be in a church, and they say, we want you to preach, and this is the lectionary text. Well, then I do all the work I can do, but still I have my instinct is to try to still put that lectionary choice. Fortunately, they'll give you a couple of texts you get to choose from in the lectionary preacher moment. But then I'll try to still do that work to put it into its context. But it seems harder and a little more artificial to do it. And I would rather do 5 sermons in Romans. But now sometimes you got to be careful. I remember going up to Boston when I was a student here at Princeton to hear Harold J. Ockengay preach at Park Street Church. And a bunch of us went up because we knew he was a great preacher. And on this honest truth, we went to Park Street Church, and Harold Ockengay stood up, and he was quite a man. And he said, he started the sermon, "This is now the 57th sermon in our journey through the book of Acts." And I thought, well, how many chapters does Acts have? And then I found out he was in chapter 12 or something like that. But you know, I never had the courage to do that. But I love Romans. I've written a commentary on Romans. I love it. And I have done it, but I have broken it into logical parts. I say, okay, I'm going to do Romans 1 through 5. And 5 is a good place to stop because Bart says that's the greatest chapter in the whole Bible. So stop with the greatest chapter in the Bible, 5. And then wait a few months. And then go 6 through 8. And then what are you going to do with ancient Israel? Okay, that's 9, 10, 11. All right. Find maybe around Labor Day, find a time to do 9, 10, 11. And then, man, 12 to 16 is majestic. But, you know, you got to give it space and time, but you have to be realistic, too. How many weeks can people handle the material? And Ockengay could do it at Park Street. We just sat there. We just were amazed.
Yeah. Tony has a question, and Tony's actually one of our responders this week, too. Or comment.
I have maybe 3 questions. The first is, what are other forms of building sermons? Why do you think exposition is the best way to proceed? And third, can you use exposition outside of the Bible for other literature?
Okay, hey, good. That's a loaded question because we're in a Shakespeare group together. You know, you can do exposition of Shakespeare, and Tony does it. So and I do believe. So I'll take the third question first. I do believe that if I'm studying a book, and I love to study the book. I just 2 nights ago did a Kindling Muse on David Brooks's book, The Road to Character, which has all these vignette pictures, and I did an exposition of them as best I could, because I think a great book deserves exposition. In other words, the goal then, I want to make sure David Brooks gets to make his point before I reflect on it. Be sure he gets to make his point. And that's what an expositor is always trying to do. When you're reading Mark Twain, let Mark Twain make his point first. I've done a lot with Mark Twain. I love him. I love Garrison Keillor. Let Garrison Keillor make his point first before you either critique him or work with him. And Shakespeare is an example of it. And I think that is a very good rule of thumb to develop that expositional model. When you're doing an illustration for your church, and I'm going to do some illustrations tomorrow to show you how you can use illustrations in a book like 2 Timothy too. But if you're doing an illustration, research the illustration like you'd research the text. Be sure you're fair to who you're quoting from, and make sure that he gets to make or she gets to make her point before you use it. Otherwise, you're kind of using somebody for your point. Don't do that. Now, the first. There are other ways to preach, and there is the thematic, and I have criticized this. I've said I'm kind of worried about what I call the thematic domination of preaching. And the thematic domination of preaching, I think, can be very dangerous. And that is where in fact, I make a little joke about this when I taught this once. Be careful that you take the whole journey from text down to discipleship. Don't start with discipleship first. Don't start with your advocacy first, with what you learned, what you believe, what you feel is valid. You may end up with a sermon that says, you should have faith because I have faith. Now, I want you to have faith, but don't make that your sermon, that you should have faith because I have faith. Then you're building their faith on your faith. And if you want to be cultic, that would be the cultic approach. But even thematic preaching can err in that danger, in that the thematic preacher is very concerned about an advocacy or a goal he wants you to come to. Maybe it's a goal that is laudable, a social justice goal, a goal about global warming, or a goal about stewardship of the earth. And then he knows that goal, and everything up here is just squeezed in to make that point, and he may use a text, but the text doesn't get to make its point because that point might go a little bit awry. And so and I think people, youth especially, can spot this. Youthful listeners will not put up with it. When they sense that you're stacking the deck in favor of your point, and mothers and fathers got to be really careful when they give their drug talks to their kids either, because kids will often feel, yeah, you've selected the evidence that you want to scare us so that we'll do this and do that. And they write you off because they think you haven't actually taken this journey with the words, journey with the historical context, journey with the theological, the meat in there of what it says and means, and then finally the audience criticism. How would the first people hear it? How would we hear it? And then, now, what do you believe? They want to hear what you believe, but don't start too quickly with what you believe and too quickly with what you want them to believe. That's the danger of thematic. I made a joke about it today, too, in another setting. I said, be careful of preaching the great holidays of the year. Be careful of Stewardship Sunday. I can honestly say in my entire career as a pastor, and I've been in churches and I've raised money, and lots of money, in Berkeley Church and in Seattle, and I've never given a stewardship sermon. It's in the text. I don't like Stewardship Sunday. I don't like Mother's Day sermons. And on Mother's Day, my approach on Mother's Day was to have a prayer for mothers. Thank God for them. And but preach on whatever was in the text that day. If we were doing a series like John's Gospel gets to win. But we're going to honor moms. I've never missed veterans on Veterans Day. I've always honored veterans, but I don't preach on that on Veterans Day on the veterans. I pray for them separately, but I preach on what was in the journey of the. If we were doing a series, I would stay with the series. People began to respect that. And they then, because I find that when people think you're going to, oh boy, this is Stewardship Sunday, and I know it's going to be today. Or this is Earth Sunday now. The Sunday after Easter is supposed to be Earth Sunday. I know it is going to be on Earth Sunday. And I know you see, that's thematic domination of preaching. The theme is dominating. And you're not allowing a text to speak. And then, ironically, on that kind of thematic domination where you've too quickly come to your discipleship question, you've too quickly come to what you want the people to land on, they don't trust the verses you quote. You selected them. But on the other hand, if you were going through Romans and you actually came upon a great text about preservation of the earth in the Romans material, and it was right there and it wasn't being forced in, they would hear it. And you would change people's minds on subjects they thought they'd already made up their mind on. Because they saw it, and that great aha moment. I saw it myself. I saw it. And many people get huge changes in their life when they see it for themselves. But so Tony knows that I've kind of been on the warpath against thematic preaching by itself. But on the other hand, when you're asked to do a theme, in fact, I've been asked to do a theme for the C.S. Lewis Foundation. They wanted me to speak on Friday morning, and I hate this when I get these kinds of invitations usually. They say, we want you have an hour to be with our students on Saturday morning. It's going to be December 5th in Seattle. And we want you to speak on humility. I don't like that. It's like I'm going to speak on social justice, humility. So, but I accepted it because, after all, it's their program, and they're doing it, and so I'm going to fit in, and I'm going to do it. But I told him, I called him back, I said, if it's okay with you, I'm going to do a Bible study on where the word appears in the New Testament. He said, that's okay. That's all right. And I'm going to...
It's good when a Christian Paul says, yeah, you can use a biblical passage. Study your word. Rebecca, you got a question.
Yes, I'm so grateful, Earl. Thank you. According to your schedule, you had an event just right before this on the West Coast. Thank you for the energy that you're giving. And with that energy, I've been listening to some of your lectures on C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, Jack Lewis.
So tonight you brought him up, and I want, if you could give us a few more words on what you said about joys. When you were talking about speed and, let's see.
Oh, yeah, the meaningful acceleration.
Right, with Moffat. And so you were grasping for that quote that you gave so eloquently when I was But if you, here's what I'm hoping that I can frame well so that you can speak to is, I sense in you, even when you aren't present, just in your voice and in your way, your word choice and your verbal demeanor, your auditory demeanor, that there's a love there, I believe, for the people, and there's this energy that you have. I want you to relate that to expositional preaching, and how does that tie in?
Yeah. Well, you know, I feel honored if you'd say that because, yes, you can teach people you love a lot better than people you resent. And, you know, it is really true. And you have to love your church. I always say there's 4 rents a pastor has to pay to get set free in a church. One, you have to know what you believe, because the churches they don't feel safe if you don't know what you believe. And then you have to be working hard, because they're working hard, and they have to realize you are working hard. It doesn't mean you post your schedule. It's just they can tell that you're working hard because they're working hard. And third, you have to be growing. They have to know you're growing. I think if people feel that you're growing, they will learn so much from you because they feel that now you're growing, not that you've finished. And then finally, they have to know you love them. If people don't think you love them, I've always said to pastors, love your session, love your people, and feel that this is the most important people I could ever be with. And for some strange reason, God wants me here this Sunday. And I do think you have to have, that's a kind of a little bit of a boldness, but you have to feel that I'm supposed to be here this Sunday, and these people need me this Sunday. And Lord, help me, I love them, but help me to be what they need this Sunday. And then every Sunday you do that. But I think they can catch it if they catch